From Atlanta, Georgia, welcome to Fearfully and Wonderfully Me, a podcast for women on leadership and life skills with Rhea Story. Rhea shares powerful life and leadership principles, helping you maximize your potential and become the woman God created you to be.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. This episode is really, it's kind of just inspired by a quote that I've shared several times recently on social media. And the quote basically, I'm paraphrasing, but it basically says, "You cannot excuse your way to a better life." And I really wanted to drill down on this topic because I have met so many people in the past who want their life to be better in one specific situation. And yet, instead of taking ownership for how they can make that situation better, they spend all of their time blaming someone or something else as to why it cannot be better. And that it breaks my heart. Number one, because as long as we're blaming someone or something else for our circumstances, we're never going to be able to take ownership and responsibility to improve it. And so ultimately we would just stay miserable. And that is life is too short to spend it miserably. So um the reason this popped up on today's episode though is this it was inspired by a conversation I had recently with someone, a man, who was talking with me and sharing with me about his struggle with influencing his 14-year-old child. And he was sharing how he knew that the teenage years were going to be tough. They're probably tough on all of us, but he could just see that his relationship with his child was going to be tough over the next few years if he didn't, increase his influence. But the problem is that, um, every time I would listen to this person and essentially he was asking for advice. He's like, well, what do I need to do to increase my influence? And so then I would offer a resource, but then he would immediately offer a resource, I mean an excuse for why that wouldn't work. And you know for me, if I'm asking someone for advice, I should be at least willing to consider the answer. But so this person was talking about how they knew they were losing influence with their 14-year-old. And I said, well, have you done this? Have you done this? Have you thought about this? Have you read this? Suggesting some resources. And essentially, this person just keeps coming back with, well, the reason I can't influence my 14-year-old is because it's his mother's fault. They were divorced. It was a divorce situation. And he was like, that's really the reason that I cannot have influence. He's like, I'm losing influence with my 14-year-old because his mother has a different rules at her house, and she lets him get away with other things. And he said, and then she calls me and complains about I'm too strict. And I'm sure that that's not an uncommon scenario for divorced parents. It's very easy to, you know well, and one of the reasons probably people are divorced is they have differences, and their values and their perspectives. And so when they are divorced, they're going to parent differently. I think that's probably pretty natural. But the problem is, particularly for this individual, is he really truly 100% wanted to have more influence with his son, his 14-year-old son. And yet, rather than saying, oh, okay, let me learn something, grow somewhere, take responsibility for what I can do to improve my relationship or my way of thinking or my way of acting, my behaviors, instead of saying, I'm going to take responsibility for that and changing my level of awareness, he just continued to say, well, you know what? It's really no point in me even trying because his mother has different rules at her house. And so I'm never going to be able to have influence with my son again. And that frustrates me on so many levels because there again, it's heartbreaking for someone to just spend their time and energy making excuses for why they cannot affect a situation. Now, absolutely, there are things in life we cannot control and cannot fix. There are going to be a few things that we cannot change. But most of the time, if we are facing a situation that we are frustrated with, if we will change our level of thinking, that's going to change the actions and choices and behaviors that we have. And that's going to change the result in the circumstances. Now, I know that this doesn't happen quickly, and that's probably what frustrates a lot of people is they want a quick answer. And so, they look around and say, I want a quick answer to this situation. I want a quick fix for this situation. And ultimately, when when the reality is that you have to put work into improving something or growing yourself or developing your way of thinking, it's going to take some time. It's going to take some energy. It's going to take some work. There aren't any shortcuts in life. And yet, when you're willing to do the work and put the work in, you can change the results that you are getting. And that is a beautiful thing, that right? Because instead of blaming someone or something else, I can focus my energy on what I need to do. Now, the number one thing that we need to do is just change the way we think, change our level of awareness relative to what's going on. And I think that I've said this before, but I think that the only best way, well, the number one best way to do that is to learn, read, read a book, listen to a podcast, watch a video and personal growth, leadership material, increase your skills, interpersonal skills, right? Interpersonal relationships. But the way you do that is it's not going to just happen by accident. You actually have to be intentional with your growth because that's what's going to change the way of thinking. But as long as you're making an excuse, you cannot excuse your way to better. You can't. You can make something happen or you can make an excuse, but you can't make something happen while you're making an excuse. Right? Excuses don't serve your dreams. Whether it's a relationship in your personal life as the example that I'm sharing, maybe you want to influence your teenagers in a different and better way. But if you sit around blaming someone else for why you can't have a great relationship with them, you're never going to have a great relationship with them. Because ultimately, I think it's Billy Taylor who said blame is comfort food for the soul. It might feel good to blame other people and say, well, I can't do anything because. And it kind of lets us off the hook because as long as I'm blaming, I don't have to do anything to fix it, right? It's somebody or something else's fault. But when I take ownership, I've got to do something to fix it. I know this is a topic I've hit many times because it's just such a powerful concept because all of us want to externalize blame. It's just human, right? We all just want to say I can't do XYZ because of so and so or so and so. And that just does not move us forward in life. And there are absolutely times when you're going to hit roadblocks and detours and things you have to navigate, obstacles, challenges. But if you're making an excuse for why you can't get to the top of Mount Everest, you're never going to get to the top of Mount Everest, right? It is maybe an uphill journey to improve our circumstances in our lives, but it absolutely can be done, but you have to start walking. You can't sit at the bottom of the mountain and look up and say, huh, I can't climb this mountain because it's too tough. That's not going to help you. That's not going to serve you. So you cannot excuse your way to better. So here's the trick on this. Like I said, we all are going to struggle with this at some level, at some way. None of us are perfect. And it's normal human behavior to find ourselves justifying, blaming, or excusing. But anytime you catch yourself in the, couldn't do this because of so and so, or I can't do this because of XYZ, start listening to the words that you use and stop mid sentence if you have to and say, you know what? Rather than saying, I can't do this, that's negative language, right? I can't do this because. Then saying, I need to focus on what I can control. And there's a powerful exercise Stephen Covey has in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People where he actually has you draw out the circle of concern, which is everything that you are worried about but you cannot control. So anything in this circle could be things like the weather tomorrow, to um, my boss's career path. Anything that goes in that circle that you have thoughts about or feelings or emotions, but you can't impact it. And then the other circle you're going to draw is the things that you can do. And when you focus on what you can do, you'll find that that circle expands over time to grow greater than your circle of concern. Your circle of influence is where your power is. And that's where you want to focus your energy. Don't focus on whether it's going to rain tomorrow, but focus on whether you need to pack an umbrella. And then the weather's not going to be as big of an issue. Now, this is there again. This is such a powerful concept because the more that we can internalize and apply this principle, the easier our life becomes. But it's tough to do. Like anything, it's very simple once you understand it, but it's not necessarily easy to apply, right? Because there again, we are human, we are not perfect. We're going to make mistakes, we're going to get it wrong, but that's okay. It is simply the journey of better. Whatever our definition of better is, this is how you achieve it. One step at a time, 1 inch at a time. I just finished reading Defy the Odds by Benny Tate, and I one of the favorite quotes in there, he says, "It's a trial by the mile, but it's a cinch by the inch." And I just love that because I talk a lot about, focus on the mile you're in, run the moment, focus on the day, the choices. Don't worry about the rest of your life choices. Worry on conquering and mastering today's choices. And if you can do that, enough successful days add up to a successful life, right? So trial by the mile, but cinch by the inch. So focus your energy on the small things that you can control and influence. And so if you were the man who was asking for advice on influencing his 14-year-old son, one of the things I suggested when he asked was, well, why don't you read the 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens with him? And he just came back and saying, well, he might not be interested in that. So rather than even try, he just wanted to make an excuse for why it wasn't worth going through the energy. And therefore he may never be able to increase his influence and improve that relationship. So there again, this is just such a powerful concept, but we all get it wrong. We all get it wrong, and that's okay. It's just recognizing the more frequently we can get it right, the easier it becomes to absorb this principle. And this really hits home for me. Mike and I spent several weeks on site with a client who really wanted to take their whole team through book studies, which is the number one method we see for growth for the clients that Mac and I have the privilege to work with. And this client really wanted to take their team through book studies at a fast level, at a deep level, and really get a jump start on growth and leadership and personal growth for their team members. And you know, one of the things that I took away from it was actually a comment from someone who said, "You know what? I've been kind of studying leadership and leadership principles." He said, and one of the things that really I've discovered through this process with the book studies is the more I absorb this material, the more frequently I can just put it in my brain in different ways, the easier it is and the more naturally it just comes out as part of who I am. And I have to agree with that because it seems so tough when we read a book or we try to learn something, we try to change our behaviors. And really, the power of growth is regularly absorbing the materials and the concepts that are powerful that help us move forward so that it's not about just something we have to think about doing intentionally, consciously, because all of us are busy and challenged. It's really about changing who we are inside. And the more that we can regularly absorb principles that will help us move forward, the easier it will be for them to just naturally come out when the time is right. Leadership and influence isn't about doing something different, it's about being someone different. And in order to be someone different, you have to grow yourself. And growth is not a quick process, right? It's not going to happen just instantly overnight. It's something that you can look back in 10 years and see, oh, wow, I've grown since 10 years ago. I know I've grown. I mean, gosh, this is 2023. I mean, 10 years ago, I hadn't written any books, and today I have 14 and 6 journals. I mean, and 10 years ago, I didn't have any books. I wasn't even writing a book 10 years ago. I was working in a what I thought would be a lifelong career path, and I had a good job and a good leader and a great organization and But life looks a lot different now than it did 10 years ago. And the reason for that, a large part of that, is just how much I've been intentional about growing since then. And you don't know where you'll be if you will just implement regular growth, daily consistent growth. You don't know where you can be in 10 years. I don't know where I can be in 10 years. But you know what? I'm excited to find out. Until next time.
Start increasing your influence and maximizing your potential with Ria's audiobooks. Available at audible.com, amazon.com, and iBooks. Please visit riastory.com to learn about Ria's books, resources, speaking, and training programs. Thanks for listening.